You can tell when it happens, but no one else does. It's not loud. It doesn't look like anything is happening at first. Someone asks you a question, a simple one. What's wrong? And instead of answering, you pause. Not because you don't know, but because, for a moment, speaking feels like trying to move through something heavy. So you say the easiest thing you can find: I'm fine. And that's where people misunderstand you, because they think silence means nothing is happening. But inside, everything is happening at once. You're in the car. The conversation shifts slightly. Nothing explosive, no yelling, just a tone. Something about the way they said your name. You look out the window. They keep talking, but you haven't heard the last 20 seconds because you're no longer in the conversation. You're somewhere inside your own head now, trying to figure out what just changed. There's a very specific kind of silence people don't talk about. Not peaceful silence, not comfortable silence, but the kind that shows up right after something hurts. A tone in a text message changes. Someone says something slightly sharper than usual. Or you feel dismissed, even if no one else notices it. And suddenly, you go quiet. Not to punish anyone, not to make a statement, but because something in you shuts inward. It can be something small. You send a message, you thought it was normal. They reply hours later. Short, dry, no worries. And that's it. Now you're staring at your screen, reading the same two words over and over again, trying to figure out what they actually meant. And instead of replying, you just stop. And here's the part people rarely understand. You are not deciding to go quiet. It happens faster than thought, like your mind takes one step back before you even realize you're hurt. If you've ever been in an argument and suddenly couldn't find your words, you know this. Not because you didn't care, but because you cared too much at the exact same time. And everything inside you got crowded. Thoughts don't organize, they stack, and then they freeze. They're talking, faster now, asking you questions. Why aren't you saying anything? Can you just respond? And you want to, you really do. But every sentence you try to form in your head falls apart before it reaches your mouth. So you just sit there, nodding, hoping the moment passes before you say something wrong. Most people assume communication breaks down because someone refuses to talk. But that's not usually what happens. More often, it's because someone has too many things they want to say, and none of them feel safe to say first. Think about a moment like this. Someone says something that hurts you. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe they did, but you feel it immediately. And in that same second, your brain starts running calculations you didn't ask for. If I say something now, will it get worse? If I stay quiet, will it pass? If I explain myself, will I even come out right? So instead of choosing words, you choose silence. Because silence feels like the only option that won't damage anything further. And sometimes you actually try to speak. You open your mouth, get halfway into a sentence, then stop, because even you're not sure what you're trying to say yet. So you shake your head slightly. Never mind. And that's the moment people think you gave up. But really, that's the moment you realized you weren't ready. And here's something important about human behavior. Silence is often mistaken as absence, but for a lot of people, silence is processing, not avoidance. Processing, just not out loud. There's usually a reason for this pattern, and it's rarely random. Most people who go quiet when they're hurt didn't learn emotional expression in safe environments. Not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. Being interrupted, being told you're too sensitive, or realizing that explaining your feelings didn't actually change anything. So, your brain learns something simple. Talking doesn't always help. And over time, that turns into something else. Staying quiet is safer. Maybe it was a moment years ago. You tried to explain why something hurt, and instead of being heard, you got corrected, or laughed at, or dismissed. And what stayed with you wasn't the words. It was the feeling. And now, every time something similar happens, your brain doesn't ask, it just remembers. So your silence now isn't confusion. It's history, it's memory, it's conditioning, reacting before you even think. But here's what people don't see. While you are silent, your mind is not empty. It's extremely active, replaying what was said, how it was said, trying to understand intent versus impact, trying to predict what happens next if you respond honestly. It's like the conversation keeps going inside your head long after it ends in the room. Hours later, you're alone, and suddenly the words come. Clear, accurate, exactly how you should have said it. You even say it out loud to no one, and for a moment, it feels too late. And this is why people misunderstand quiet individuals so easily. They assume no response means nothing's going on. But usually, it's the opposite. No response often means too much is happening at once. There's something else happening too. When you finally do speak again, you're not speaking from the first emotion. You're speaking from the final version of it, filtered, replayed, refined, sometimes even softened, just to make sure it doesn't break anything. And when it finally comes out, it's calm, almost too calm. And that's when they say, see, it wasn't even a big deal. Not realizing you already processed the storm alone. That's why people say, you never tell me what you're feeling in the moment. But for you, the moment isn't where clarity happens. Clarity comes later, sometimes much later. And yes, this creates distance. People think you don't care, or you're detached, or you're hiding something. When in reality, you're trying to make sure your words don't turn into something you regret 5 minutes later. Because once something is said in emotion, you can't take its shape back. Even if you apologize, even if you explain, it still existed. So silence becomes protection, not just for others, but for you too. But here's the problem. While silence protects you, it also isolates you. People can't respond to what they can't hear. And over time, distance forms where understanding was supposed to be. You start noticing it. Less texting, shorter conversations, more it's fine on both sides. Not because the connection disappeared, but because neither person knows how to reach the other anymore. Not because you didn't care enough to speak, but because you cared too much to speak too early. And maybe the hardest truth in all of this is, most people are not waiting for perfect words. They're just waiting for something real, even if it's messy, even if it's incomplete, even if it comes out wrong the first time. But if your system has learned that wrong can be costly, you'll always wait until it feels safe enough to be right. So if you recognize yourself in this, the silence is not the problem. It never really was. The real question is, who in your life makes silence feel safe? And who makes it feel like something you need to escape from? Because the goal isn't to become someone who never goes quiet. The goal is simpler than that. To reach a point where you don't have to disappear just to stay safe. And when that happens, your words don't become louder. They just come earlier, closer to the moment you were about to disappear. And that changes everything.